Every single day, I create life inside a laboratory dish for couples who can't do it any other way. That's my actual job. So when my ex-husband stood up at his newborn twins' launch party, in front of 300 guests, raised his glass, and called me a cold woman who never knew how to give life, I just smiled. Because 3 weeks after our divorce, when Julian texted me photos of the twins he'd just had with my former best friend, something in my professional memory snagged. Chloe had told me herself, years ago, that she couldn't conceive naturally. I hired an investigator. What I found wasn't a miracle pregnancy. It was an IVF clinic, a sperm sample that wasn't Julian's, and a blood relative deliberately chosen close enough to fool a family DNA test. I didn't say a word that night. I just handed the results to his own mother and let her be the one to stand up first. The champagne was warm by the time Julian raised his glass. I remember that detail because I was holding a flute someone had handed me 40 minutes earlier, and the bubbles had gone flat against my palm. 300 people. The Montgomery Estate ballroom. All limestone and chandeliers. The twins asleep in a cradle carved from the same pale wood as the family crest above the fireplace. He tapped his knife against crystal. The room quieted. "To my children," Julian said. "Proof that some of us were built to give life." He looked at me then, across all those heads. "And a small toast to the cold woman who never learned how." A few people laughed. The kind of laugh that checks the room first. Chloe stood beside him in ivory silk, one hand resting on the cradle, and she did not laugh. She watched me. I set my glass down on the marble sill. Quietly, the stem clicked once against the stone, and I smiled. Here is the thing about that smile. Everyone read it as surrender. A woman absorbing a blow in public, too proud to cry. What none of them knew was that I had already read the paperwork sitting in a manila folder in Beatrice Montgomery's private study, and that in about 90 seconds the woman who despised me most in the world was going to rise from her chair and burn her own son to the ground. But let me go back.
You need to know what was true before that night.
For 5 years, I was married to Julian Montgomery. I am Elena Kincaid, 37, and I do a specific kind of work. I am a clinical embryologist. Every day I sit at a microscope and watch cells decide to become people. I can tell you the hour a fertilization occurred by the pattern of the 2 pronuclei. I can look at an 8-cell embryo and know whether it was made yesterday or the day before. I read life the way other people read faces. It is the one thing I have never been wrong about. I was wrong about a person, though. Just one. When Julian's startup was drowning, I pulled it out 3 times. Not with encouragement. With money. My grandmother left me an inheritance and I moved it, quietly, in amounts I still remember to the dollar. $187,000 the first time, when payroll was due and the account showed 4 figures. 2 more transfers after that. I told myself a marriage is a lab. You keep the conditions stable, so the thing inside can grow. I kept us stable. I ran quiet. He called that coldness. The divorce papers said irreconcilable differences, but the story he told at dinner parties said more. That I was clinical. That I lived at the lab. That I couldn't give him what a man like him deserved, a family. He said it gently, which was worse, the way you describe a diagnosis. And people nodded because I don't cry in public and I don't raise my voice, and to a certain kind of person a woman who stays calm must be a woman who doesn't feel. What no one repeated was the folder in my own filing cabinet. Both of us had been tested 2 years into the marriage when the pressure started. My results, normal. His results, normal. There was nothing wrong with either of us. There was only something wrong with wanting me. He married Chloe 11 weeks after the divorce was final. Chloe Vance, 35, my college roommate, the woman who once held my hair back in a dorm bathroom and told me secrets I never repeated. One of those secrets, I want you to hold on to this, came out on a balcony at somebody's wedding, years ago, when she'd had too much wine. She'd cried a little and said the doctors had told her she would almost certainly never carry a child on her own. That her body simply wasn't built for it. I held her hand that night. I believed her because there was no reason not to. 3 weeks after my divorce, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was loading the dishwasher. It was Julian. A photo. Two newborns swaddled in blue and pink, side by side, and above them a single line of text. Turns out I just needed the right woman. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the granite and finished loading the bottom rack. Wiped the counter. Poured a glass of water I didn't drink. And then I picked the phone back up because something had caught the way a thread catches on a rough nail. I zoomed in on the photo, not on their faces, on the plastic bands around their tiny wrists and the corner of a document just visible behind the pink blanket. A printed sheet, the kind that comes home from a hospital, but the header was wrong. I'd seen 10,000 of those headers. That logo, that pale blue mark in the corner, was not a maternity ward. It was a fertility clinic. Chloe, who couldn't conceive naturally, had 2 natural newborns. And she'd left a piece of paper in the frame that only one person on Earth would recognize on sight. I stood in my kitchen at 11:40 at night, holding my ex-husband's proudest moment in my hand, and I could not stop staring at that corner. I did not sleep that night. I made a pot of coffee at 4 a.m., sat at the counter, and enlarged the photo until the pixels bled. By 6, I had memorized every corner of it. Then I showered, put on my badge, and drove to the lab like it was any other Tuesday. The Lakeshore Fertility Building is quiet before 8. I like it that way. I badged in, changed into scrubs, and stood at the incubator bank for a long moment, listening to the soft mechanical breathing of 40 families in progress. That sound has always steadied me. I checked the overnight logs. Bay 4, a 5-day blastocyst grading well. I noted it, initialed it, moved on. You look like a woman who read her own autopsy, Marcus said. He was leaning in the doorway with 2 coffees, one held out to me. Marcus Reyes has worked embryology for 15 years and misses nothing, which is why I trust him and why I did not turn around too fast. Didn't sleep, I said. Julian's remarried and a father now. It's not my business anymore. Marcus set the coffee by my elbow. You read embryos better than you read men. Always have. He said it lightly, the way you tease someone you respect. But he watched me a beat too long. You okay, Elena?
I Phoenix.
I kept my pen. Tell me something. If a woman is told her uterus can't carry to term, near 0 odds natural, and 8 months later she has spontaneous twins, what's the first word in your head? He didn't blink. IVF. Second word, transfer. Why? No reason. I smiled. Hypothetical. He didn't believe me. He let it go anyway. That's the other reason I trust him. Here is the thing about near 0. I have said those words to patients across a desk, kept my voice level while their hands found each other under the table. I had heard them once from the other side of a wine glass. Chloe, 7 years ago, at my kitchen table, 3 glasses of Sancerre deep, telling me her doctor had used the phrase structurally, "It's just not going to happen for you naturally, honey." She'd cried. I'd held her hand. I was her friend then. I remembered the exact tilt of her mouth. And now there were twins. Natural, the announcement said. A boy and a girl. God's timing. I went back to work. I really did try to leave it alone. For 4 days I graded embryos and counseled couples and drove home and left it alone. Then at my kitchen counter I opened the photo again. The announcement had listed the details the way the wealthy do, as if biology were a press release. Born at 37 weeks. A boy, 6 pounds 1 ounce. A girl, 5 pounds 9. I wrote the numbers on the back of an envelope. Twins at 37 weeks is textbook. That's when they schedule the delivery. And the weights. Both of them healthy, matched, delivered clean. I did the arithmetic backward from the birthday to conception. Then I counted forward from the divorce. I sat very still. Julian and Chloe had married 11 weeks after our divorce was final. Do the math on gestation, and these children were conceived before that. Before the ink. That part one already knew and had already swallowed. But conception and transfer are different dates. A natural pregnancy starts on one unrepeatable night. A transfer starts in a room I have stood in 1,000 times, under lights I know the wattage of, with a woman on a table and a monitor and a clock on the wall. The timeline didn't fit a night. It fit a cycle. Stimulation, retrieval, A 5-day wait. A transfer. The whole calendar had a shape, and I have that shape memorized because I draw it for a living. I told myself I was a jealous woman inventing a conspiracy from a birth weight. I told myself that for one more day. Then I stopped telling myself things because the not knowing was louder than the knowing would be. I did not want revenge. I want to be clear about that even now. I wanted the truth to hold still long enough for me to look at it. There is a difference, and I have spent a career on the right side of it. Dana Okafor came recommended by a lawyer I trusted, which in this city means something. We met in a diner off Wacker, and she ordered dry toast and nothing else and let me talk for 11 minutes, without interrupting once. When I finished, she asked exactly 2 questions. Then she wrote a number on a napkin, slid it across, and said, "I don't do jealous. If this is jealous, keep your money." "It isn't," I said. She studied me. "Then what is it?" "A woman who can't lie to me told me she'd never carry a child. Now she's carried 2. I just want to know where." Dana folded the napkin back into her palm. "For days," she said. "Maybe 5. It was 4. She called on a Thursday at 9:12 in the evening while I was rinsing a single wine glass. I dried my hands before I answered, because some part of me already knew. "Are you sitting down?" Dana said. "I found the clinic. And the name on the file isn't Julian." The line kept repeating in my head on the drive over. I parked outside the diner near Wacker at 9:41, and the neon sign buzzed a soft pink that made the wet pavement look like it was bleeding. Dana was already inside, back corner booth, 2 mugs of coffee she'd ordered before I arrived. She'd learned my order in 4 days. That told me something about her. I slid in across from her. The vinyl seat was cold. She had a folder, but she didn't open it right away. "Before you look," she said, "I want you to know how I got this so you understand what it is and what it isn't." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "There's a woman named Rita. She worked intake at Lakeshore Fertility for 6 years. Left last spring, bad blood over a schedule dispute. People who leave angry remember things. I bought her a plate of eggs and let her talk. And Chloe Vance is a patient."
Was.
2 cycles. Dana turned the folder a 1/4 inch toward me, then stopped. "This is billing and appointment records." Photographs of screens Rita still had access to for about 11 minutes. "It's not a court exhibit. It's a map." I opened it. The first page was an itemized invoice. Egg retrieval, cryopreservation, embryo transfer. The dates ran backward in my mind before I even meant to do the math, the way you feel your foot find a stair in the dark. I looked up. "These dates work for the twins," I said. "I figured you'd know that faster than me." 37 weeks. 6 pounds 1, 5 pounds 9. I had already run those numbers alone in my kitchen at midnight, and here they were confirmed in someone else's ink. Natural conception doesn't leave a paper trail like this. This did. The waitress came by and refilled Dana's coffee without asking. The smell of it, burnt and old, filled the space between us.
"I hadn't touched mine."
"So it's IVF," I said. That's the whole story. She couldn't conceive. She did IVF. She is Julian's children. I said it flatly, testing whether it would hold. It didn't. I heard the crack in my own voice before Dana did. She caught it. "But you don't think they're Julian's?" "I don't know yet." I turned the page. And there it was, the thing that made my hands go still. The sperm source field. It wasn't a name. It was a code. A string of letters and a number. "Anonymous designation," I said. Rita said that's standard when the donor requests confidentiality. The clinic seals it. Even the patient chart shows a code, not a name. Legally, that seal is a wall. I can't get behind it without a subpoena, and you don't have grounds for one. I read the code 3 times. It meant nothing, and it meant everything. Somewhere in a locked file was a name, and I couldn't reach it. 15 years of handling anonymized samples, and I'd never once hated a code the way I hated this one. "Why anonymous?" I said, half to myself. "If Julian gave the sample, there's no reason to seal it. You seal it to hide who it is." Dana let that sit. "Keep going." Here is where being good at my job stopped being a comfort and became a kind of torture, because I understood exactly what I was looking at and exactly why I couldn't prove it. I set the folder flat on the table and pressed my palm over it, the way you'd hold down a page in the wind.
Dana.
Listen to me. The Montgomerys don't just want children. They test them.
I heard how strange it sounded out loud.
Beatrice runs the family trust-off bloodline. There's a genetic panel. Every heir gets one. It's about paternity, but it's dressed up as heritage, a measure of how much Montgomery blood you carry. If those babies didn't carry enough of Julian's genetics, the panel would catch it. The trust wouldn't recognize them. So the twins passed the panel, Dana said slowly. Which means if it wasn't Julian's sample, it had to be someone who shared enough of that same Montgomery blood. The coffee smell turned my stomach. The blood doesn't have to come from Julian specifically.
It runs through the whole family line.
Any close relative would carry enough of it to clear a lazy panel. A brother, an uncle, a cousin. Dana didn't move. Outside, a bus sighed to a stop and pulled away, and the pink light stuttered across her face. How many men fit that? She asked. Julian's an only child. His father had one brother. I was already building the list in my head, the way I'd sort samples by donor, cold, and orderly. That brother had one son. Name. I didn't answer right away. I thought about a wedding 4 years ago, a man in a rented tux who spent the reception at the open bar and left before the toasts. A man who'd asked Julian for a loan at Thanksgiving in front of everyone and laughed like it was a joke when Julian said no. 31 years old and never held a job past 6 months. Travis, I said. Then I said it again, quieter, mostly to myself, the way you say a diagnosis you were hoping to be wrong about. Travis Montgomery. The name sat on the table between us like something that might move. Dana was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the folder under my hand, then at me. When she spoke, her voice had dropped all its warmth, and what was left was flat and careful and certain. If you're right, she said, this isn't an affair anymore. This is organized fraud.
Dana didn't like the plan.
I could tell before she said a word, the way she set her coffee down and looked at the ceiling of my car like the answer might be written there. You want me to pose as a recruiter, she said. Get Travis in a room. Offer him a job that requires a wellness screening. Collect a cheek swab. A software sales role, I said. He's told 3 people at 3 different bars he's in tech now. He'll come for the title alone. She was quiet for a moment. The parking garage under Lakeshore hummed around us, fluorescent light buzzing on the concrete. It's a gray area, Elena. A swab taken under a false pretext won't hold up in court. You know that. I don't need it to hold up in court. I need to know if I'm right. That was the lie I told myself at 8 a.m. That knowing would be enough. That I could stop once I was sure. Dana made the call on a Tuesday. She was good, warmer on the phone than she'd ever been with me, laughing at something Travis said, penciling him in for a Thursday interview at a rented office suite in the Loop. I heard the recording after. He sounded exactly like Julian's family sounds when they smell money, easy, entitled, already spending it. Then Thursday came, and Travis didn't. Dana called me at 4:03 that afternoon. He canceled. 2 hours before. Said his schedule freed up in a different direction. A pause. And Elena, he asked me who referred him. I gave him the cover name. He said he'd run it by family first. I set the phone on the kitchen counter and put both hands flat on the granite. Outside, a garbage truck was backing up somewhere, that steady electronic beep. I counted the beeps. I got to 9. The text came at 9:20 that night. Not from Travis. From Chloe. I read it twice. Still jealous after all these years? Don't touch my family. I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark with my eyes open, and for the first time since the christening photo, I felt the floor tilt under me instead of under them. Julian's message arrived the next morning, and it was worse because it was polite.
Elena.
I know it's you. Harassment is a crime. My attorney will be reaching out. Please stop before you embarrass yourself further. Attached, a screenshot of Dana's cover number, circled in red.
He'd found the thread.
Travis had run it by family, and family had a lawyer on retainer. I went to work anyway because the alternative was sitting still. Marcus found me in the culture room at lunch, watching a day 3 embryo divide on the monitor. 8 clean cells, nothing wrong with it at all. You look like someone who lost a game she was winning, he said. 15 years in this lab, and he still read me faster than I liked. I told him. All of it, the recruiter, the swab, the texts. He listened without touching his sandwich. So you tipped them off, he said finally. They're circling the wagons now. Julian, Chloe, Travis. He tapped the counter. And Beatrice. Beatrice hates me. She always has. Beatrice hates dishonor more. He leaned back. Elena, that woman put a 5-generation family tree in a gilt frame in her foyer. You've seen it. You think she'd choose her son's feelings over the purity of that line? He shook his head. You've been treating her like Julian's shield. She might be the only person at that estate who cares about the truth for its own ugly reasons. I didn't say anything. I hadn't thought of Beatrice as anything but the woman who'd once told me, at Christmas, that I had a scientist's hands, not a mother's. She'd said it with a smile, over the good china, and I'd carried it for 6 years like a stone in a coat pocket. But I filed it now, the way I file everything. A slide with a label I'd come back to. That night, I almost quit.
I want to be honest about that.
I sat in my car in the lab lot with the engine off and did the math a person does at the bottom of something. If Julian sued, my license came under review. 15 years of my own work, gone over a man who'd spent my inheritance and called me cold. I typed a message to Dana. Maybe we stop, and my thumb hovered over the arrow. I didn't send it. I went back inside instead. I don't know why. My badge still worked at 11 p.m. It always had. The lock clicked green like it forgave me. I pulled up the images from a case that afternoon, the branching cells, and I sat there in the dark room with a monitor glow on my face. I thought, I can't get Travis. He's guarded now. He'll never hand me a swab, never sign a form, never come within a mile of a needle eye control. Every road went through him, and he'd closed every gate. I stared at the embryos on the screen, cell after cell, the whole quiet architecture of how a person begins. And then it landed. So simple it embarrassed me.
I didn't need Travis's DNA.
I needed the children's. The invitation came on cream cardstock, embossed with the Montgomery crest. A pediatric cancer benefit at the Newberry, hosted by the Family Foundation. My name was still on the old guest list. Someone in the office had forgotten to scratch it off. I turned the card over twice under the kitchen light, then leaned it against the toaster and let it stand there for 3 days while I decided whether a dead woman could walk back into that world. I went. I wore gray. I stood near the silent auction tables and let the room forget me, which it did easily, because a room like that only remembers what it wants to remember. Chloe arrived at 7:20 with a nanny and a double stroller. She looked radiant in the way that costs money. The twins were bundled in matching wool, the boy in slate, the girl in cream. 6 pounds 1 ounce. 5 pounds 9. I knew those weights better than their own mother did. She let strangers lean over the stroller and coo, and she wore the smile of a woman who had gotten away with it. I did not approach. I got a glass of water, and I watched. Here is the thing they never understand about my work. Patience is the whole science. You wait for a cell to divide on its own clock, not on yours. You do not rush the dish. So, I waited by the auction table. I watched the nanny lift the boy and wipe his mouth with a soft muslin cloth. I watched her fold that cloth and tuck it into the stroller side pocket. Then, 20 minutes later, when the girl fussed, I watched her drop it, used, damp, discarded, into a linen bin by the coat check. Abandoned.
Public.
No expectation of privacy. I had read the case law that afternoon in the parking garage, on my phone, engine off. I claimed my coat at 8:05. The attendant handed it over the counter, and I reached past his elbow into the bin as if studying myself. The cloth went into my pocket the way a tissue goes into a pocket. My hand did not shake. I had held a pipette over a single embryo for 9 hours without a tremor. A square of muslin was nothing. In the garage, I sealed it in a specimen bag from my kit and wrote the date and a case number that meant nothing to anyone but me. Marcus met me at the lab the next morning before the text came in. 15 years he'd been doing this. He unlocked the freezer room, looked at the bag, then looked at me for a long moment. "You know I can't run family samples here," he said.
I know. I'm not asking you to.
"I'm asking you to help me read what someone else runs." We sent it to an independent lab in Evanston, the kind that does paternity work and adoption reunions. No Montgomery money anywhere near it. I paid in my own name. I requested a full autosomal relatedness panel, not the paternal line, but the whole scatter of markers that measures, to a percentage, exactly how much blood two people share. Then I did the part that was legal and public and beautiful. Beatrice Montgomery had submitted the family's genetic profile to a Heritage Genome Society 6 years ago. She'd framed the certificate, published the markers in a heritage journal she funded. The Montgomery genome, documented and deposited, the line traced back to a shipbuilder in 1847. Public record. I had it printed and laid flat on the counter, waiting. The results came back on a Tuesday for 03 in the afternoon as an encrypted PDF. I opened it standing up. The twins carried far too little of the Montgomery genome to be Julian's children. Not a son's half. Not even close. Only the thin fraction a cousin's child would share, a clean shortfall at marker after marker where a son's inheritance should have been. Whoever the father was, he stood at a cousin's distance from that shipbuilder. Montgomery blood, but nowhere near close enough to be Julian. I sat down. I read it again. My heart did the thing it does when the numbers finally lock, a slow, heavy knock, like someone at a door I'd been expecting for years. Then the second confirmation came, from Dana, by voice, at 5:40 that evening. The intake nurse, Dana said. Rita's old coworker. She confirmed the donor wasn't an anonymous purchase. It was flagged internally as a directed relative donor. Family member. Signed consent on file. A directed relative donor. A known man. Same blood. Chosen precisely because the Montgomery panel screens for share of the bloodline, and a cousin carries enough that a lazy test would pass. But nowhere near a father's half. Never a parent's share. The one thing they didn't know to hide. Travis. One son of one uncle. The only man who fit. I printed everything. The Evanston panel, the published profile, side by side, the shortfall circled in blue pen. I laid it flat, and I called Marcus over. He read it the way he reads a hard case, slow, top to bottom, his glasses pushed up. When he finished, he took them off and set them down very gently on the counter, and I heard the small tap of plastic on steel. He didn't look up right away. Then he did. If you take this public, you don't just end Julian. You end a whole bloodline. 300 years of a name. Those children become nothing to nobody overnight. I picked up the pages and squared their edges against the counter. No, I said. I'm just going to stop covering for them. And I already knew whose hands I would put it in. I did not mail the folder. A thing like that gets lost or opened by the wrong assistant or photographed. I drove to the Montgomery estate on a Tuesday morning, the gravel loud under my tires, and I told the man at the door that Beatrice was expecting me. She was not. But her name in my mouth carried enough certainty that he let me wait in the front hall, under a chandelier I had once helped pay to insure, though no one in that house ever knew it. She kept me there 40 minutes. I counted the chimes of a grandfather clock and the sound of her heels finally coming down the stone. You have exactly the nerve I always suspected, Beatrice said.
Call me.
Before someone sees you. The library smelled of old paper and lemon oil. She closed both doors. I set the folder on the reading table between us and did not sit. What is this? The genetic report on your grandchildren, I said. And the embryology summary that goes with it. I thought you should be the one to read it first. She did not touch it right away. She looked at me the way you look at a stain you are deciding whether to blame on the cat or the guest. Then she opened the cover, and I watched her eyes move down the first page, the shortfall I had circled, the phrase relatedness consistent with a first cousin once removed, not a parent, the plain sentence beneath it that no elegance could soften. She closed it. You disgusting woman. I said nothing. You lost him, and now you build this laboratory fiction, to poison two infants. I have seen jealousy. I have never seen it wear a lab coat. Her voice never rose. That was the thing about Beatrice. She and I were alike in the one way neither of us would have admitted. Her hand, though, had gone flat on the folder, pressing, as if to keep it shut by force. You don't have to believe me, I said. I would be insulted if you did, on my word alone. Call your own doctor. Take your own sample. I'll give you the accession numbers for the Lakeshore lab, so you can verify the chain of custody yourself. I am not asking you to trust me, Beatrice. I'm asking you to trust the report you can commission with your own money from people who have never met me. That reached her. Not the accusation, the procedure. She was a woman who trusted process the way other people trust God. She crossed to the phone on the desk, an actual landline, and dialed from memory. Gerald. It's Beatrice. I need a paternity confirmation done privately and quickly, and I need it done as though your career depends on the discretion. A pause. Because it does. She read him the numbers off the page in a voice like a metronome. Then we waited. She did not offer me tea. She stood at the tall window with her back to me, and for a long while the only sound was the clock and, once, a gardener's mower somewhere far across the lawn. I thought about the twins, 6 pounds 1 ounce, 5 pounds 9, and how none of this was their doing, and how that was exactly the part no one in this house would grieve. Gerald called back in 90 minutes. I only heard her sigh. Yes. A silence I could have walked into.
Yes.
You're certain? No, I don't want it softened. Gerald, I want it accurate. She set the receiver down with great care, as if it might shatter. When she turned, her face had changed.
Not toward me.
Toward something colder and older than me. 2 children, she said quietly, carrying my late husband's name and not one drop of his blood in them. She pressed a knuckle to her lips. Do you know what that is in this family? It is theft. It is theft dressed up in a christening gown. I know, I said. You don't. Her eyes came to mine, and I understood then that she had not, for 1 second, done this for me. You were merely inconvenient to them, Elena. This is a desecration of everything I have spent my life defending. She was not going to protect me. She was going to protect a name, and I happened to be standing in the same direction as her aim. That was enough. In this family, that was the most reliable kind of alliance there was. Then we understand each other, I said. Do we? She sat, finally, and gestured me into the chair opposite, and now we were 2 women at a table with the same weapon between us and 2 entirely different reasons to fire it. Julian borrowed against these children, she said. Did you know that? He came to me 8 months ago, glowing, asking me to reaffirm the trust. Bloodline heirs. He used those words. Her mouth thinned. So did his creditors, I imagine. There it was, another thread I had not yet pulled, dangling now in her own hand. Borrowed against them. I filed it away and said nothing because I have learned that the most valuable thing you can do with a new fact is let it finish arriving. She squared the folder's edges until they were perfect, the way she squared everything. You will not go to the police, she said. You will not go to a lawyer. You will not breathe a word to my son or that woman, or the little parasite she used. She folded the folder closed and rested both palms upon it, and her voice went to ice. The christening will proceed exactly as planned. You'll come, and you'll let me handle the rest. I looked at her hands flat on that folder, and I understood. The final blow would not be mine to strike. It would fall from the one person in that house no one would ever see coming, my former mother-in-law. The room smelled of white lilies and warm champagne, 300 glasses catching the chandelier light. I stood near the tall windows on the east side of the great hall, close enough to hear, far enough to stay invisible. On the dais, 2 bassinets in Montgomery cream. Julian stood between them like a man who had never once been afraid of anything. He tapped his glass with a silver knife. The room hushed. 5 years, he said. I waited for a family, and I learned something. Some people are born to give life. He looked toward me then, and smiled the smile I had once mistaken for love. And some people are cold. Some women simply cannot give what they don't have inside them. The laughter came in a soft wave. Polite, cruel, 300 people amused at once. A woman in green near the bar laughed into her drink. I set my glass down on the sill. I did not look away. I smiled. Because I knew what the next 60 seconds held, and he did not. At the head table, Beatrice rose. She did not tap her glass. She simply stood, and the hall quieted the way a room quiets when the oldest money in it decides to speak. Her spine was straight as a rifle. In her hand was a single folded page. "Before we toast my grandchildren," she said, "I owe every person here the truth. Because I do not build my house on a lie." Julian's smile held, but something behind it slipped. "Mother." Gerald ran the panel twice. Her voice did not rise. That was the terrible part. These two children carry the Montgomery name. They do not carry my son's blood. The panel puts them at a cousin's distance from this family, a fraction, where a child of Julian's would share half. Whatever these babies are, they are not Julian's. The word blood landed in that hall like a dropped tray. Nobody laughed now. A man near the front set his champagne down so hard the stem cracked. I heard it, thin and clean, across the whole room. Chloe went the color of the tablecloth. She reached for the nearest bassinet, a small animal reflex, both hands. And Travis stood up. That was the tell, the one I'd waited 3 months to see. Nobody at that table should have flinched at a paternity result. But Travis pushed back his chair. The legs shrieked across the stone floor, and half-turned toward the terrace doors like a man who already knew which exit was closest. "Travis," Beatrice said, without even looking at him, "sit down. You've done enough standing for one lifetime." He sat. I crossed the floor. My heels were the only sound. 300 faces turned as I came, and I let them. I had rehearsed nothing because I had lived this in my head at 2 in the morning for 11 weeks, and my hands were steady now the way they were steady over a dish under the microscope. I stopped at Chloe's table and laid the folder down in front of her. Lakeshore's letterhead, 2 cycles, the intake dates, the sealed donor code, and beside it, in Marcus's clean print, the match line. "You told me once," I said quietly so she had to lean in to hear it, "that you could never do this the natural way." I remembered.
"Anna."
Her lips barely moved. "Please." "I grow life for a living, Chloe." I opened the folder to the first page and turned it to face her. "I make it in glass every single day for people who deserve it. So I know exactly what it looks like when someone builds a child instead of conceiving one. Every date in here is an IVF date. Every one. 2 cycles at Lakeshore. You chose Travis because his DNA would pass the family panel close enough to fool a lawyer." I let a beat fall. It didn't fool an embryologist. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out, and then too much did. Julian knew. He knew about Travis, he said the money, and she clapped a hand over her own lips, but the hall had already heard it. 300 witnesses. She'd said his name and the word money in the same breath, and I watched it register on every face like frost spreading across a window. Julian took 1 step toward her. "Shut up." "The money," she whispered again, and started to cry. I did not feel triumphant.
"I want to be honest about that."
I felt the way you feel when a long test finally resolves and the answer is exactly the ugly thing you suspected.
"Clean."
Cold.
"Correct."
Beatrice was still standing. She folded her single page in half, and in half again, and set it beside her untouched glass, and in that small motion, she cut her son out of the family more finally than any lawyer could. That was when I heard it. Off to my right, near the bar, one of the men Julian had invited to impress. Gray suit. A face I'd seen on a lender's website at 3 a.m. He had his phone already at his ear, and he wasn't whispering. He turned his back to the room the way men do when a number stops being social and starts being legal. "Get me the file on the Montgomery line of credit," he said, flat and hard. He looked at Julian, and his voice went to iron. "Because if those children aren't Montgomery heirs, what exactly was your loan secured against, Julian?" The gray-suited man didn't wait for an answer. He tucked his phone into his breast pocket, walked to the terrace doors, and made a call I couldn't hear. But I watched Julian watch him go. That was the moment Julian understood. Not the DNA. Not Chloe. The math. I know the exact face a man makes when a number he's been hiding finally stands up in a room full of people. His jaw did nothing. His hands did everything. Beatrice was already at the head table, folding her reading glasses into their case with the calm of a woman closing a ledger. She did not look at her son. She looked at the caterer and said, quietly, "Stop serving." The champagne stopped. 300 glasses stayed half full. 2 days later the trust called it. I heard it from Beatrice's attorney, a woman named Priya, who phoned my lab at 4:03 p.m. while I was warming a dish of media in the incubator. "Mrs. Montgomery has instructed us to suspend all distributions to Julian, effective immediately," she said. "She'd like you to know the instruction cites the paternity findings by name." I set the dish down. The incubator door sealed with its small pneumatic sigh, the same sound it makes 40 times a day. "Why tell me?" "Because his creditors will subpoena the marriage," Priya said. "She thought you'd rather see it coming." I did want to see it coming, and when I finally saw it, I understood what 5 years had actually cost. Marcus stayed late with me that Thursday. I'd pulled the financial disclosures my divorce lawyer had subpoenaed months earlier and never truly read. I'd signed, back then, just to be done. Now I spread them across the light table we used to check straws of frozen samples, and I read the way I read a chart. Slowly. For anomalies. There it was on page 19. A personal loan of $187,000, drawn the same week I'd wired that exact amount into Julian's startup, 5 years ago. He'd told me my money saved the company. My money had gone to pay down a loan he'd taken against our house, a house I didn't know was mortgaged. He'd borrowed against my life, then let me plug the hole with my inheritance, then thanked me at dinner. "Elena," Marcus said. He'd stopped pretending to work. "You okay?" "He didn't lose my money," I said. "He laundered it through me 3 separate times. The exact 3 times I thought I'd rescued him. Every rescue had a matching loan hidden underneath it, like a second heartbeat you only find when you know to look for the second heartbeat." I did not cry. I photographed every page and sent them to Priya with one line, "These belong in the trust's file." Then I finished warming my media and went home. The open loop I couldn't close yet. Where was Chloe in all this? She'd confessed at the christening, but confession isn't a plan. Women like Chloe always have a plan. I found out on a Sunday from Dana, who called me from a rest stop off I-80. "They ran," Dana said. Wind pushed against her phone. "Chloe and Travis cleaned out the joint account Julian didn't know she'd opened, the one where the loan advances landed. Cash and a wire to a bank in Ohio. They took the liquid money and left him the babies and the debt." I stood in my kitchen and listened to the semi-trucks behind her voice. "How much?" "Enough that he can't chase them without admitting the account existed," she said. "Which admits the fraud.
He's stuck."
That's the elegant part. She built him a cage out of his own lie. Chloe had never wanted revenge on me, I realized. I was just the door she walked through to get to the money. The twins were never about Julian's bloodline. They were about a claim on Beatrice's trust, a claim that needed to look Montgomery long enough to borrow against. Travis was the cheapest way to fake it. And Chloe was the one who'd known, from the first, that the whole structure could only stand if no one in the family ever read the DNA. They'd forgotten one thing. Reading is what I do for a living. I did not celebrate. I want to be honest about that because I keep expecting to have felt triumphant, and I didn't. What I felt was tired and clean. I let my attorney do the rest. No press.
No confrontación.
She filed to recover the inheritance Julian had fraudulently commingled, documented, dollar by dollar, with the pages from the light table. It would take months. It would come back with a paper trail, so clean that no one could ever call it revenge. Beatrice kept 2 things, the twins, in a quiet arrangement I never asked about, and her name, which was the only thing she'd ever truly been protecting. For 3 days, the world went silent. I slept 8 hours. I ran a fresh cycle for a couple from Rockford who'd been trying for 6 years, and I watched a single cell divide into 2 on the monitor at 7 a.m., and for the first time in a long time I just watched it without thinking about anyone named Montgomery. Then, on the 3rd night, My phone lit up on the counter while I was rinsing a wine glass. Julian Montgomery calling. I let it ring out. A text arrived before the screen even dimmed. I was wrong.
Come back to me.
You're the only one who ever understood me. I looked at the screen for a long time. The water was still running. The phone kept lighting up on the counter. Julian's name, over and over, like a smoke alarm with a dying battery. I let it ring twice more while I dried my hands on the dish towel. Then I picked it up.
And
His voice had a wet edge I'd never heard in 5 years.
please.
Just 5 minutes. I know You have 30 seconds. A breath. I made mistakes. Chloe's gone. Travis is gone. They took the last of it, the cash, everything, and the house is being valued Tuesday. Mother won't take my calls. A pause. I could have driven a truck through. You always knew how to fix things. You're the smart one. You always were. There it was.
Not I'm sorry.
Not I was cruel to you in front of 300 people. Just you're useful again. You called me cold, I said. In front of everyone. Twice, actually. Once at the christening. And once is the number of times I'll listen to your voice for the rest of my life. Elena, the twins. Our children. They deserve better than both of you. I looked out the window. 22 floors down. The loop was throwing its lights against the low clouds. Goodbye, Julian. I hung up. Then I opened the settings, found his number, and pressed block. The screen asked if I was sure. I have never been more sure of anything measured in my whole careful, calibrated life. I pressed it again. The little contact card went gray. That was the last time his name ever moved on my phone. The letter came 4 days later, on Thursday, in an envelope the color of bone. I knew the paper before I read a word. Montgomery stationery, heavier than anything you'd buy for yourself, the kind you can feel the watermark in when you run your thumb across it. Beatrice's handwriting was small and upright and old-fashioned. She did not apologize. I want to be exact about that because I'd spent 5 years being told I read things wrong. She wrote 4 lines. She said the trust had been reorganized and the twins would be provided for, quietly, under her name, because whatever their blood, they had done nothing. She said Julian had signed papers he should have read. And then, at the bottom, no softer than the rest. In all of this, you were the only person who did not lie to me. I find I am not able to forget it. I read it twice. Then I set it in the drawer where I keep the things I don't need but won't throw away, my mother's watch, the deed to nothing anymore. I didn't write back. Some doors you close gently. You don't have to slam them to mean it. My lawyer, Priya, called on a Monday to say the last of it had cleared. Not all $187,000. Some of that was gone into the ground of a company that never existed the way Julian said it did. But the traceable portion, the wire records, the loan he'd hidden that matched my inheritance to the dollar, that came back.
Clean.
Documented. Every cent had a paper behind it. I didn't celebrate. I just felt the floor come back under my feet, the way you do when a plane finally lands and you realize you've been holding the armrest for an hour. Wednesday, I went back to the lab. Marcus was already there, gowned up, 15 years of steady hands moving under the hood. Kincaid, he said without looking up. You're late, and you look like a person who sleeps now. It's alarming. Don't get used to it. There was a new couple on the board, the Okonkwo's, 3rd cycle, a woman who had cried in the consult room and apologized for crying. On my screen the dish held a single embryo, day 5, a blastocyst blooming out in that impossible pale ring. I brought it into focus the way I've done 10,000 times. And there it was. The inner cell mass, dense and true. No mark I hadn't earned. No timeline that lied. I put 2 gloved fingers flat on the base of the scope, the cold metal I know better than my own pulse, and I watched a life that no one had staged. Real cells. Real division. The genuine article, made out of hope and hard science and nothing false. Grade? Marcus asked. Good, I said. My voice did something I didn't plan. It's good. He glanced over. Whatever he saw, he let it be. That night I stood on my balcony with a glass of Barolo, the kind Julian used to say I didn't appreciate. 22 floors up, Chicago laid itself out. The Willis Tower, the Black River, the lake going on past the edge of the light like something that doesn't need an audience to be enormous. I thought about the word cold. How for 5 years I'd tried to be warmer, softer, smaller, feeding my inheritance and my expertise into a marriage like coal into a furnace, keeping other people warm while I went dim. You cannot set yourself on fire to heat a house that was built to burn. So I stopped. I make life for a living. I know it grain by grain, cell by cell, and I know precisely when someone has faked it. What they built was a lie with 2 heartbeats. What I make is true. I lifted the glass to the skyline, to the cold that was only ever their word for me, and I drank. If this story kept you company tonight, stay a while longer with us, and take this with you. Never burn yourself to keep a liar warm.